Welcome, Nomad Nation, to the first episode of. Not the first episode. Welcome, Nomad Nation, to the second episode, the first real concrete episode of Written Word Wednesdays, where we read and hopefully eventually create the written word, whether it be articles, fiction, poetry, and basically just trying to appreciate literature and appreciate the written word. So, like I said in my interview, I'm just gonna try to start off a little bit simpler than like a whole entire book because that's daunting to me. Middle school Imad would be very disappointed in the fact that I said that, but let's be face facts. Like the whole book, even the first chapter, is very daunting to me. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna read one of my favorite articles ever written about Toronto. It is called "Welcome to the New Toronto, the most fascinatingly boring city in the world." And this was written by Stephen Marche, Stephen with BH and March, Marche, on Monday, published the 4th of July in 2016. So, several, like five years old. But I believe it says a lot of things that are still very relevant about the city of Toronto today. So what we're going to do is I'm going to link to it in the description or in the comments, and I'm going to just read it, and then I'm going to give my thoughts. So I just read the first bit and I decided I should probably just go like part by part and then just give my thoughts. So the first, like, kind of introductory part it does is, and I love what they say, in sense that the definitive moment of the new Toronto took place, and in a skit by Drake. Drake, for whatever you may think about him, has done possibly the most out of any person ever in terms of Toronto pride. The man received the key to the city. Like, the man made the six, coined the term the six. Like, I don't know who actually coined the term the six, but the man popularized the term the six. And without Drake, there would not be the level of Torontonian pride that we have right now. And so the reference is Saturday Night Live sketch, which it's a really good sketch. If you haven't seen it, try to find a way to find it. And it says, "You're a black Canadian," the host asks. "Obviously, dog," and has a Torontonian accent. And then they bring into the comparison of Toronto to Chicago. I think it was very, very interesting in their the author's statement where the author says, "What Chicago was to the 20th century, so the 1900s, Toronto will be to the 21st. Toronto will be the great city of post-industry." So this is like very, very valid. I'm just gonna read a little bit more and then get back to you. Okay, so good. So I'm just gonna reference a few of the lines in this really, really great paragraph and then go back up and review some of the things they said beforehand. "The worship of safety and security applies across all fields and industries." In Toronto is what I had. "A reliable person is infinitely more valued than a brilliant one." Oh, I want that tattooed on something, on a throw pillow. "The steady hand of Toronto is the Toronto ideal, as Toronto's steadiness is why people flock here, and all the people flocking here are making it exciting. That's why Toronto is the most fascinatingly, totally boring city in the world." I'm gonna go back up and just kind of explain some more. So this was obviously in 2016. Some of the facts are outdated. But in the comparison between Chicago and Toronto, Chicago was a city of, like, what they say, industry. So what they said really cool is like Chicago is grit, top quality butchers, glorious modernist buildings, and government blight. Toronto has clean jobs and in terms of artisanal ice creameries, identical condos, excellent public schools, and free healthcare for all. Chicago is a decaying factory where Americans used to make stuff. Toronto is a new bank where the tellers can speak 2 dozen languages. So, like, really comparing the two. You feel a natural ease in time when you touch down from another city. You do not have to strain for hope here. And I want to, like, kind of editorialize in the sense of, like, what is hope? What is that hope that the author is talking about? The future matters infinitely more than the past. Yeah, Toronto is definitely a city that's like living in the future. It's constantly looking forward, and that's part of the things that I feel like is the crux. One of the things that I feel like Toronto doesn't do as well, in the sense that, like, Toronto doesn't have a rich, strong history. And they bring up a point about something in Spadina that I'll reference later on. But I love the point where they say Toronto is now grown up enough to be rife with contradictions. So they talk about the extravagant growth, the comparison from 13 skyscrapers in 2005, and they say now close to 50, and this is 2016, so it's even more now, right? Because we've had more skyscrapers. Yeah. Toronto has now grown up enough to be rife with contradictions, and for example, and its contradictions are making it interesting. Yes, it's an interestingly boring city, right? It is, for example, by far the safest city in North America, an extraordinary law-abiding place by any measure. And then they also mention Rob Ford and kind of contradictory thing of having a safe city and then also a crack smoking mayor who's like breaking the law, and criminality did not affect his popularity. Toronto's dullness is what makes it exciting, a tricky point to grasp. Toronto's lack of ambition is why the financial collapse of 2008 never happened here. Like, that's good that, like, a financial collapse didn't happen. But I think to this point, what's the point they're trying to make is, like, the lack of ambition in Toronto. And like I said, the worship of safety and security applies across all fields in industry. All right, I'll keep going. I'm just going to read it right now because this is a really important part. The fundamental contradiction of the new Toronto, however, is that it has come into its own by becoming a city of others. In the Canadian context, Toronto is no longer first among equals in a series of cities strung along the railroad between the Atlantic and the Pacific. Not quite sure what they mean by that, but it has become the national metropolis. Very true. The city plugged into the global matrix. At the same time, Toronto is 51% foreign born. And they link to a thing for that. I would argue that that number has probably increased since 2016, with many people from over 230 countries, making it by many assessments the most diverse city in the world. Now, what is the true diversity of that? That's what I would editorialize and ask. But diversity is not what set Toronto apart. The near unanimous celebration of diversity does. Very accurate. Toronto may be the last city in the world that unabashedly desires difference. Toronto may be the last city in the world that unabashedly desires difference. This openness is unfortunately unique. And they bring up the various things of populism, xenophobia, and sentiments that have happened throughout the other parts of the English-speaking world. And it makes the claim, which I don't think is 100% accurate, that Canada has largely escaped this rising loathing for others. A 2012 study, they're saying, compared to the citizens of other developed immigrant-receiving countries, Canadians are by far the most open to and optimistic about immigration. That's factual. That's a 2012 study, and then, like, I mean, I don't know anybody who would dispute that compared to other nations. The lack of political xenophobia has emerged for reasons that are peculiar to the Canadian experience and not because we're somehow better people. So they're also establishing that they're Torontonian or Canadian, right? And then bring up some history in this incident in Quebec in 1995. And then I like this point. The most important finding from the Berkeley study was that, quote, in Canada, those who express more patriotism were also more likely to support immigration and multiculturalism. In the United States, this correlation went in the opposite direction. So people who are more patriotic in the United States are more likely to to decree immigration and multiculturalism. They bring up like the really important point of how access, like physical access to Canada, is difficult compared to so many other nations in the sense that they only have one border and three. Like, they describe brutal oceans, which is like really a really salient way to describe it. So people who immigrate here are doing so, are you more likely to proper channels. It talks about the mundanity or the boringness of Muslim families in Toronto, which I find hilarious. Which and accurate too. Like Muslims, like as much as the Islamophobia persists in North America and the Western world, like Muslims are more normal people like any other people. I say that as a Muslim. yeah. So they bring up kind of the point of multiculturalism no doubt has its crises, and those crises are accelerating. So even though we're multiculturalists, there are competing values of the different spheres in Toronto and Canada. So it says, when the province of Ontario announced a new sex education curriculum that included open discussions on homosexuality, recently arrived socially conservative Muslim and Chinese Canadian Christian parents pulled their children from public schools in protest. So you're saying, like, it's kind of illustrating the point that, like, in Toronto and Canada and Ontario, you have multiculturalism, but you have spheres that bump up against each other but don't really integrate, to the point where certain issues like homosexuality in the educational curriculum can divide people. And they mentioned the carding scandal, which is, if you are a Torontonian, you do not know the carding scandal, and you want to say that you support Black Lives, do your homework. Do your homework. Learn the carding scandal. I'll also do my best to link to it in the description, the summary. But some to say what they say here is, more serious are issues around race and policing, which have consumed the city for the past 2 years. So 2014, 2015, 2016 is what is written. The carding scandal, in which the police were revealed to be racially profiling the Black community, exposed profound problems with our police force, which is in dire need of reform. Defund the police. Defund the police, Toronto. This is a story that has been playing out in American cities as well. But Black Lives Matter has been distinctly Torontonian. Activists protested at the police headquarters for 14 days, received a meeting with the mayor and the premier, and then disbanded peacefully. There was no hint of a riot, nor even a bad behavior. This, I feel like, is an inaccurate portrayal of the real realities of BLMTO. But that's my personal opinion. It is accurate to a degree, but I think it's I don't know, a little patronizing in a certain sense. There was no hint of a riot, nor even bad behavior. Toronto activists sought redress for poor government in an entirely orderly fashion, and their demands, which were utterly reasonable, thank you, belong to the best traditions of polite Canadian politics. The activists were pursuing, just like Canada's modus operandi enjoins them to, peace, order, and good government. Oh my gosh. So much to say about peace, order, and good government, and we will continue that at the end. Wow, this is a long video. Thank you so much for watching. On any given morning in the Shepherd's... Okay, I'm just going to stop there because that was a long video. What you can do is you can go back and read the rest of the article because it's kind of like, it has a second section. And I'm just going to kind of give my thoughts. So, why do I love this article so much? Why? Because this is one of the most honest and accurate, in my opinion, portrayals of Torontonian society. Torontonian society is really the most interestingly boring city in the world. Only in Toronto, I love this, the quote that says in the second half of the article, or the one I have not read and will not really touch upon, allow you to read yourself. It's like, only in Toronto will you find on Spadina and Bloor a monument to something that didn't happen as opposed to something that did happen. When you construct monuments, you construct monuments of things that happened. Of war heroes, of significant people. Like a statue of Terry Fox is a statue of Terry Fox. Why? Because that man did so much for Canadian and throughout the world cancer survivors and cancer people who have cancer. In Toronto, though, in Spadina, they were going to build, I believe, an underground railroad, or not railroad, an underground railway system, and they didn't. And so they made a monument to that. So you can go to Spadina and Bloor, and you can actually see this. It's very interesting. They have 3 plaques to with information on that. I really dislike the values of Toronto. And part of the reason that is that there aren't values in Toronto. There really aren't. I mean, we pride ourselves in multiculturalism and diversity, and yet, as the article states, in a multicultural and diverse sense, anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism perpetuates. We are a city where the mayor is suing a Black man for constructing homes, tiny homes for homeless people, houseless people, I would rather say, houseless people in the winter, suing this person that is evicting people in encampments. This is the reality of Toronto. Same mayor who was reelected. There's so much white liberalism in Toronto, and I need to define white liberalism, but I just and white liberalism, has really been the dominant ideology for so much of, I mean, my time in Toronto, and a lot of it has to do with like Trudeau's and the Liberals' political ideology and the Liberals' political supremacy, I will say, because they're the dominant political faction, having the most seats in Parliament, right? Like, it's not just Toronto, but our Prime Minister was exposed to doing brownface, to doing blackface. And we as a society immediately forgave him. As a society, immediately forgave him. Particularly the people who did not forgive him were most likely to be conservative. Were conservatives who didn't want to forgive him as a part of a political agenda. We may have multiculturalism and diversity, but we do not have harmony and equity. We have multiculturalism and diversity, but we do not have true racial and cultural harmony and racial and cultural equity. I grew up in an international environment. I was an expat, an expatriate, in a country that accepted people from all around the world. And in my community, my school, we had internationalism. We did not just tolerate you, we accepted and loved you. I learned this in my Canadian nationalism class. In Canada, it is not a huge, amazing place where every culture is valued just as much as anything. It's a hierarchy. It's a vertical mosaic. Who's at the top? The English. And the French, right, if you want to say below, or right beside. It's for that reason that there are provinces in Canada where more funding is going towards teaching French, when there's like so little French people actually speaking that, than actually speaking Indigenous languages, where there's a much larger majority of people speaking that. Thank you, Media Indigeneity. It's a podcast that taught me that. I'll try to link that in the comments below, too. Toronto is a city where the police can brutalize Black people. Brutalize Black people. Black queer people, Black trans people, Indigenous people. People of color in general. And, like, let's talk about the BLMTO protests in 2016. Like, the outrage of white Canadian society, and really Canadian society as a whole, like the non-Black Canadians as a whole, even Black people in Canadian society, the outrage of people towards BLMTO for having the audacity to fight for their rights is disgusting. Disgusting. And I know that we're living in a different world with the Black Lives Matter protests and support that the Black Lives Matter has received in 2020. But I will never forget the Torontonian and Canadian response to that. The Canadians' response to that, to so much, like particularly the white cis gays who decried and slandered, run BLMTO's name through the mud. When they were fighting not just for black queer lives, but for brown queer lives. Even more so for trans queer lives, for Muslim queer lives. The most even more marginalized people. That's Toronto. That is Toronto. Toronto is the city that, for all as multicultural as it is, like, I've faced police brutality from campus police, I've faced police brutality from Toronto police, and I'll go into that story another time. But Toronto, I have such little respect for Toronto. Like, one of the biggest points this has is that this is a city that values consistency over brilliance. This is a city that values consistency over brilliance. Let's talk about Drake. Like, Drake, for being one of the most prolific and popular pop stars, rap stars of the current era. Like, there hasn't been a year since like 2015 when he hasn't had a top 10 charting single in a year. Like, almost a year for that. Drake as well, like in his Canadian production. Like, let's talk about Views. Like, Views, that album that had the CN Tower on it, was also a B+ mediocre album at best. Drake's best album was his second album. Drake is the artist that was featured on a Migos song, Versace, before like Migos blew up in 2017. Was featured on a Migos song where he has Versace, produce head on me like Illuminati. This is a gated community. Please get the property. Rap must be changing because I'm at the top and ain't no one on top of me. Prophecy, like, that eventually came true. Niches being one in a verse by that. That's not a swap me. And then his most salient point. Born in Toronto, but sometimes I feel like Atlanta adopted us. Like, that is the most Canadian person, right? That is the people we champion. Drake, who literally said it the word. And, like, a lot of this has to do with the rejection of Canadian artists and that, like, the acceptance of art in America with so much more over Canadian people. Born in Toronto, but sometimes I feel like Atlanta adopted us. Like, that's the person we cherish. No, if I ever met Drake, I'd be like, you need to do better. Like, you need to do better. Thank you for all you've done for the Six and for the Pride, but, like, Like, can you not? Why can't you be the exceptional rap star, the exceptional artist that you were when you produced your second album, the one that had "Take Care" and "Make Me Proud"? I can't remember the name of it. And be Torontonian Canadian at the same time. We don't value brilliance. We do not. We do not value brilliance. Sandy Hudson has done so much for Black Canadians. Sandy Hudson, founder of BLMTO chapter, has done so much for Black Canadians. She was in University of Toronto students. There's so much for University of Toronto students, for students just like university students as a whole. Like, listen to her podcast. Was it Sandy and Nora Talk Politics, I believe, with Nora Loretto. So Sandy Hudson and Nora Loretto. Like, she is a champion. She's a hero of Toronto. But most of you don't know her name. Like, most of you don't know who she is. You know who Rob Ford is. John Tory, Drake, The Weeknd. You know who these people are. You don't know who it is. Viola Desmond is not Torontonian, but it speaks to the larger Canadian issue. Who's Viola Desmond? Like, the fact that, like, some people don't know who Viola Desmond is, a woman who's on the $10 bill now, it's indicative of the anti-Black racism that exists in this country. So how can we make Toronto better? Like, this is like, it's not a point that they kind of bring up, and like, I don't want to make a follow-up video to this because they have a lot of really good points. But how do we make Toronto better? Number one, I think the valuing of consistency over brilliance, we need to either own that or change that. Because, like I want to be, like, I'm a singer, a rapper, a musician, a mashup artist, a poet. I am all those things. But, like, I don't, and I want to rep the city of Toronto in the sense that, like, there are so many good people doing small, amazing things that never get enough coverage. That's the reality of Toronto. That's what I love about Toronto. There's so many good, interestingly, dynamic people who do amazing things, who produce great content, who produce great art, who produce great services. Like, that's the beauty of Toronto, that, like, so many people fly under their radar. But why can't we engender Toronto pride? Like, why can't we engender true Torontonian pride? Not just the six, but, like, real Torontonian pride. Like, how do we do that? Like, that's really a challenge I have. So, like, if you have ideas for this, please make follow-up videos or respond in the comments or say whatever you'd like. But, like, how do we do better, like, in the terms of making Toronto, not, like, highlighting and expressing and valuing the people in Toronto that make it amazing? Because Drake is not one of those people. Drake grew up in what, Forest Hill, Richmond Hill? They grew outside of this. The Weeknd, another very, very, like, popular Canadian artist, was from Scarborough, and Scarborough isn't within the GTA. But I don't resonate. Despite both of us being, like, of Ethiopian descent, I don't resonate with Abel Tesfaye, The Weeknd, for all of his music about drugs and fucking women. Excuse my language, screwing women. I don't resonate with that. I resonate with people like Angeli. Juno Award-winning artist. She wrote Brand New Chick or Brand New Bitch. In 2011, she won a Juno Award for Best New Artist. I believe it was 2011. And it's a woman who doesn't even live in Toronto anymore. Doesn't even live in Canada anymore. She's in New York. Her song, which was on radios, which was so good, was such an underrated song, was even culturally appropriate giving to a white British artist, because that's cultural appropriation is something that happens all the time here. Actually, Guyanese Canadian. Angeli, you are my hero. Forget Drake, you are my Canadian hero, Angeli, because your art, your music, your soul speaks to my life. No, you don't stand a chance for a second in my world. The same old song, you won't last long if you can't change the stand behind the music. All the fame, all the girls, all the money in this world, they don't mean shit. Better admit if you can't stand behind the music. Like, that's her words. And yes, some of you might know it as a Cheryl Lloyd song, but that was Angeli's words. Watch the music video. Like, that's powerful. Like, her art is powerful. Like, why is she in New York right now? Why doesn't she have a Canadian label? Why isn't she signed to OVO or any other label here? Like, why does brilliance in Toronto have to leave to get recognition? Why do we spend so much money in our tech and our business and our banks and, like, build up all the people and like say it's so good for you to be successful, to be in the finance industry, to be a doctor. I'm not gonna say doctor. Doctors are very important people, but to make money, it's so important for you to make money, to have a nice condo, to afford a rich home in this country, in this city. Than producing quality. The people who produce quality are the people who are hustling, who are struggling to pay rent, who have debt. Those are the people of Toronto. Those are the people I seek to champion in the city. If I become a Torontonian icon, I will be the Torontonian icon who creates other Torontonian icons, who shares in the wealth. Because that's what it should be. That's what it should be. Forget, and the last part I'm going to bring up is this really Canadian point that they bring up. Because let's be honest, I may have been in Toronto for 7 years, but I do not value the ideologies that the Canadian ideologies. I may be born in Canada, a Canadian citizen, but I do not value these Canadian ideologies that this author stated here, and I gotta find it. I'm really heavily because I'm out of shape. I'm fat, that's why. Yeah. The activists, if you can believe it, to BLMTO, the activists were pursuing, just like Canadians, modus operandi, and joins them to, quote, peace, order, and good government. Canadian ideals, right? Peace, order, and good government. In America, it's more like life, liberty, pursuit, and happiness. All men are created equal, for however contradictory they are in fulfilling that statement. And freedom. But Canada has peace, order, and good government. I am not a nigga. I am not a person who believes in peace, order, and good government. Why? Because peace, order, and good government has not satisfied me, has not served me, has not protected my rights, my charter rights. No. I don't believe in peace, order, and good government. I believe in brilliance. I believe in honesty and transparency. I believe in equity, not multiculturalism, but equitable acceptance of all cultures. I believe not in a vertical mosaic where the French and the English are at the top, but one where the indigenous, the black, all the POCs and all the cultures that make up Toronto, that make up Canada, are valued just as equally. Time has to change. Time has come for things to change. Things have to change. I'll be the person to make that happen. So if you want to do that with me, if you are a Torontonian creator, particularly if you have art in terms of written word, in terms of songs, in terms of dance, or if you're just a cool person who's created great content, please respond to me. Please message me. Please send me, and I would love to highlight you and your work and why you are a citizen of Toronto that makes Toronto great. I'm serious. Like, I want to champion you. So my DMs are open. Contact me on Instagram. Obviously, it's at behappy_not_mad. I have a link tree with all my contacts there. My email is imad at nomadcreations.info. And I'd love to change Toronto in the sense to make it not the 6, but the 6,000 people, more than 6,000, the 6 million people that make it amazing. And I'd love for you to come on this journey with me. I will be producing content every day, with Fridays as my off day, so 6 days a week of different things that matter to me, to detail them. Mashup Mondays, where we produce mashups and talk about mashups. UFT Tuesdays, where I critique and protest and talk about UFT. We have Written Word Wednesdays, like today, where we talk about the written words, so literature or articles like this one, poetry, etc. We have Dance Thursdays, so dancing and all general aspects of Dance Thursdays. If you're a dancer, I would love to work with you, learn to dance with you, highlight you on Thursdays. Friday's my off day, and rest day, and then Stranger Saturdays. So I'd love to meet like people I meet. I love meeting people. So if you are a person who wants to be highlighted on Stranger Saturdays, just have a shout out, a hi, something like that. Stranger Saturdays, and then Song Sundays, where I'll be singing, producing songs, and covering songs, producing songs. So if you're also a musician that does that, please hit me up, and I'd love to highlight you on Song Sundays too. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves, and have a great day.